All right, Ms. Ramirez, are you ready? Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Debbie Brand. Bienvenido a todos. Me llamo Debbie Brand y soy la directora de Sleepy Hollow High School. Padres, si por la gente que habla español, puede elegir en las opciones español para escuchar todo en español. So welcome everyone. This is our back to school family town hall, and our goal this evening is to just welcome you back and to give you some of the details that are coming up for this new school year. You will have the option at the end of the evening to ask questions, but throughout the meeting you can put questions in the chat. Just know that only the hosts will be able to see those questions and comments. So if you have things that you want to give to everybody, they won't be able to see it. So at the end, Mr. Baxter is going to review all of your questions, and he will synthesize the ones that are similar in nature and that cover most of the topics. Just so you all know, right now, Ms. Ramirez is interpreting, and she will be doing that throughout. We won't be having a lot of delay, but she is going to be interpreting right now. I'm allowing her to do that so that she can communicate to our Spanish-speaking families. Okay, so the topics that we'll be covering this evening include the school and schedule setup. We'll be covering general health and safety protocols. We'll be looking at school life, and so you can get some insight into the student experiences while they're in school, particularly in the conditions that we have in place for this school year. We will go over arrival and dismissal procedures, the support systems that are in place in the high school for your child in terms of their emotional and social well-being, the techniques or the steps we will take if we do have to pivot to remote instruction, and we'll also talk a little bit about the technology that will be available. And we'll also provide you with some contact information this evening. Okay, so first for the school and schedule setup. The first day of school, as I hope you all know, is next Thursday. That's a week from today, September 9th. We're very excited for students to be here, but we do have some holidays coming up next weekend, so school will begin after those holidays. The school schedule this year will be the traditional class periods that we've always had in the past. Please note that that schedule can be found online on the under students on our school website. We will be going to school 5 days a week, and all students are expected to attend school each day. So these are some general health and safety protocols that we expect, or that we will provide. These are the things that students and families need to do. First, students must wear masks during the day. So do all faculty and staff will also be wearing masks all day long. There will be mask breaks afforded to students as they need them. No masks will be required to be worn while students are eating. And I will speak about mask wearing during athletic events later on as well. Families should temperature check and check for symptoms prior to students leaving home. And all students will have to complete the daily attestation form. Before you come into the building, you have to complete that survey each day. If a member of your household is waiting for the results of a COVID test, you must remain home until a negative result is received. If the test yields COVID positive results, you must quarantine and may not return to school until the conclusion of the quarantine period. We also ask that you wash your hands and that you complete that daily attestation form as mentioned earlier. And just so you know, there will be slightly different rules and requirements for those who are vaccinated, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So some more general health and safety protocols for, this is what the school will do. Desks will be 3 feet apart in the rooms, and in the assigned seating will be given in all classes, and that will limit the number of students who have to be quarantined. Social distancing will be practiced, and outdoor dining spaces will be available during lunch periods for those times when students are unmasked. The tables in the lunchrooms will be 6 feet apart. We will have regular cleaning by custodians daily and throughout the day for common touch points. We do have two-way hallways established, and we will contact families if a student has been exposed. So these are the protocols for quarantining after exposure. So the criteria for exposure to a COVID positive individual that will result in a quarantine are as follows. If a person is within 3 to 6 feet of a positive individual for 10 or more minutes when masked, or for any period of time when they're unmasked, they will be considered exposed to a COVID positive individual. So after you've been exposed, these are the protocols we will follow. If you are unvaccinated or you are only partially vaccinated, you must quarantine for 10 days once you've been exposed. If you are fully vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine. However, the mask wearing that happens during the day must happen throughout the day, as is always the case. But in terms of times when you will be eating, you will be asked to eat in a separate area until that time period has passed where you are safe. If you do choose to go get a test 3 to 5 days after the exposure and you test negative for COVID-19, you can return to the regular protocols you were previously following before you were exposed. For visitors, all visitors, all appointments with the school staff will be done through virtual meetings this year. So please call ahead to make those appointments. If a family member needs to drop off materials or supplies to students, you can bring them to the front security desk. If there is an extreme situation that requires a parent to be present for something that's an emergency, of course, exceptions could be made in those instances. In terms of lockers, in general, we will be offering lockers for students in both PE and general lockers. We are asking the following of students to keep too much congestion from going on in the hallway. Students should not linger at their lockers. We ask 2 to 3 minutes maximum at your locker. So, get your things, put them away, etc. Students should plan to carry materials for multiple classes. Not all of your classes. We will allow a few different points during the day, but we ask that you be prepared to do that. Locker usage will be staggered, and I'll go over the schedule in a few minutes. And students should wait to use their locker if the locker is beside theirs is being used. In other words, like if you have a locker, the person next to you is at it at that moment, we ask that you just wait until that person clears away to use your locker. So this is the way we're going to stagger lockers. If you have an odd numbered or even numbered locker, we're going to change when you can go to your lockers. So for the students with an odd numbered locker, when you arrive at school, you can go to your locker before your lunch period and before period 7. This is going to be the main difference between the two groups is, at the end of the day. So you should get your things. If you are an odd number locker, we ask that you get your things for the rest of the day and for going home and bring those with you to your final block. For even numbered lockers, students, when you can go when you arrive at school. Again, make sure if someone's at their locker, though, that you don't go to your locker when someone else is next to you. before your lunch period, and then again at the end of the day after period 8. So while the odd lockers go before period 7, even lockers are going after period 8. And again, we're doing that just to keep the traffic to a minimum at the end of the day. For physical education lockers, you will change for PE this year. The PE teachers will review the protocols on the first days of school on how they're going to keep the locker room safe while you're changing. But of course, everyone must remain masked while they're in the locker rooms. So for hallways and staircases, staircases will be designated for up and down traffic flow. The main wider staircases will be a two-way flow, and I mean, they're naturally partitioned with a middle bar, so students can go up and down. But staircases in the east hallway and by the cafeteria are one way, and there will be signs on the stairwell or staircases so you know which way that you can go. And again, we're doing that to make sure that we don't get overcrowding in any staircase. There will be a dividing line down the middle of each hallway to indicate to students the flow of traffic and to discourage students from crossing the line. Again, just be prudent and wise and try not to, crowd other people while you're walking down the hallway. And as I mentioned earlier, locker usage will be limited. I'm sorry, I should say see previous slide. And students should use their lockers and then leave. Please don't socialize by your lockers. And again, that's to keep the hallways from getting, from people standing still too long, hanging around each other. We're trying to keep everyone safe. For students for arrivals, so we have 3 different ways to enter the building, depending on how the type of transportation you're using. For students who arrive by bus, you'll enter the school through the doors on the lower west hall near the bus drop-off area. For the students who arrive by car, you'll enter the doors of the north hall at the top of our driveway near the performing arts entrance. And then students who walk to school will enter the building through the main entrance of the building. For lunches, all students will need to have their lunch ID on the lanyard they received in the mail to receive their lunch. The first lunch is not charged for, but any additional lunches will be. So just so you know, there are forms in the mailing you received at home if you want to fill out those forms to receive it. Also, those of you who are on free and reduced lunch, please complete that form regardless of whether or not you feel you're going to get free lunch. It's important for you to do so. Juniors and seniors will be permitted to leave campus for their lunch period, but please remember that this is only an upperclassman privilege. Freshmen and sophomores may not leave campus. Juniors and seniors are allowed to, but they must exit and return through the main entrance of the building, and they have to sign out and sign in. This is for safety reasons. We want to make sure that all students are accounted for in the building and in case of an emergency. So it's important that students go in and out of that main entrance at lunchtime. And students are not permitted to take cars off campus during that time as well. Ms. Ramirez, did you mention to the families that they should still complete the free and reduced lunch form? Thank you. Okay. In terms of lunch arrangements, students may eat lunch in the cafeteria in a special area designated outside of the middle school and high school gyms or in a courtyard. We will set up 3 20 by 20 tents and additional tables to accommodate students in the courtyards during any weather. Obviously, when it gets colder, we will have more students in the building. Every student must sign in at their lunch table. There will be a QR code taped to every table so that the student can log in with their phone or with their computers. And they just complete a brief form. I think it's 3 questions asking their name, what area they're sitting in, and the number of their table. And again, we're trying to do this to limit the number of quarantines in the event that someone does get exposed to someone positive. We will be quarantining by table because we've spaced the tables far enough apart. So students who are at the same table would be quarantined, but neighboring tables, not necessarily unless those students interacted with the positive individual. Dismissals. To prevent crowding and congestion in the hallways at the end of the day, students with odd numbered lockers should immediately leave the building or go to their after-school activity at the end of the day. Students with even numbered lockers can go to their locker after period 8, and this is as I described earlier. And students should use the same entrance or exit as they used at arrival times, depending on if they're walkers, they get driven, or they take the bus. So the bus students should leave the west exit, the walkers the main exit, and then the car drivers out the performance arts exit. Supports that exist in the school. As always, we have our guidance counselors. Our guidance team is ready and available to assist families and students with both academic as well as any social emotional needs. The guidance office is located across from the main office beside the senior lounge. Students can stop by any time of day and sign up to make an appointment. On the screen, you'll see a list of the guidance counselors. If students can't remember their guidance counselor's name, they can always come to the main office or the guidance office, and we'll be happy to assist them. We also have some other support staff that I'll mention in a moment. So some further supports, in addition to our guidance counselors, we also have our school social worker, Ms. Walsh, our school psychologist, Ms. Kuhn, and our school assistance counselor, Ms. Donahue, and our school nurse, Ms. Steele. They are available to support students and their families, regardless if they are in person or happen to be remote because they had been quarantined due to exposure. So we are here for students and for families, and we know that there are many different struggles that are happening, and we want students to let us know so that we can support them through that process. So for technology needs and remote pivot, as was the case in previous years, all students will be given a Google Chromebook in the first week of school. However, students are allowed to use their own devices in school should they choose to bring it. Classroom instruction will utilize the Chromebooks as a tool, but not necessarily as a sole form of communication as was done last year. Teachers will be using things like Google Classroom and other technology-based platforms so that they can more easily pivot to remote instruction if that becomes a necessary option. It also, we found, helped to keep students more organized and on top of their work, which is why we used those platforms, and hopefully we will continue to use them as a tool for student learning. If remote instruction becomes necessary, teachers will use many of the techniques similar to the ones they used last year. And there is no remote option this year, however. But if a student is quarantined, arrangements will be made for the student to receive synchronous or asynchronous instruction, but that is only afforded to students who are documented as being quarantined or have a medical note that says they were quarantined due to COVID. For fall athletics, students who play an outdoor sport do not need to wear a mask while playing that sport, but they do need to wear it anytime they're indoors, such as to go to a locker or something like that, or to meet with their team. Indoor sports must wear masks. I believe in the fall, the only sport that affects is volleyball. For spectators, at this time, we don't have a limit on spectators. Any new guidelines regarding the spectator policy will be communicated to the community by Mr. Arias, the athletic director. And spectators coming into the building for volleyball will be asked to show their COVID-19 sports-specific attestation form prior to entering the building. And so those families will get further guidance from the volleyball coach. So contact information for the building. So the assistant principal, you might have seen him, he's on the screen now, is Mr. Baxter. And he is in charge of discipline in the building. He is also our DASA, that's Dignity for All Students Act, that's involves with bullying. He's the DASA coordinator for our building, and his email is on the screen. His email is also on the website if you need it. Just so families know, we also have a DASA form on the website. So if you have any instances where you feel that your child is experiencing bullying of any kind, you can report it, and those forms do go directly to Mr. Baxter, the guidance department chair, and to me. I'm Debbie Brand, and of course you can email me as well. I also encourage parents to write down my my Instagram and or Twitter account handle, depending on what you follow. I am in the process of trying to create a Facebook handle as well, but running into a few problems with that. So hopefully we'll be able to get that up and running as well. But we will try to communicate to families through Remind, through email, through the website, through phone calls, through text messages. It's really important that parents try to look at one of those different platforms in order to get information from the school. So this screen has information about who families can contact if they have questions. And so this is actually a rather big flow chart. So I suggest that you go to the website where it is available under parents, where you can write where you can look at who to contact, and it's available both English and in Spanish. I will also be sharing this presentation on the website so that anybody who is looking at it will be able to just click on that link from this presentation and it will take you right to that page. Some upcoming dates that are important for you to remember. So tomorrow, September 2nd, we have our new student orientation, and that's going to be for all incoming freshmen and transfer students from 12 to 3 p.m. at the high school. We strongly encourage all new students to attend. Please RSVP to the main office, Ms. Castro, Ms. Jessica Castro. If you have not already, it will help us with our numbers. We will be serving lunch for students, and there will be tours and an opportunity to ask questions, to look at their schedules, to meet some of their teachers and guidance counselors. So it will really be a way to help kids feel more comfortable about coming to school. The next date is September 9th, is the first day of school for all students, as I mentioned before. That first day will not be a typical scheduled day. We will have special events planned for students. And really the goal is to help students acclimate back into the building, to have some time to spend with their peers and their teachers in a low pressure way. And so it's a really great day for kids to get involved and to meet everybody that they haven't seen in a long time. Also, a couple of other small dates. September 16th, school is closed for a holiday, and on September 29th, we have a virtual back to school night, and we will send out information about that in the coming weeks. So now it's time for your questions. So if you have not already typed questions in the chat, you can do so now, and we would be happy to answer questions for you. Mr. Baxter, whenever you're ready.
I think you did such a wonderful job, Ms. Brand, that I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, we'll wait a few minutes in case anybody comes up with a question. I did see that someone asked the question of, the single way staircase, if that will cause kids to be late. I think in the first week or so, teachers are always much more forgiving about students being late to class, as they find the quickest, most efficient route to class. I think once they get used to things, they will be able to find a route that, doesn't really hold them up or cause them to be late. But yes, teachers are always, pretty forgiving, especially early on. And students tend to have more than enough time to get to their class. So, but again, sometimes, especially for new students, it does take time to figure out the building and ways to get there.
So there's a question about field trips, if they're going to be field trips this year.
It's a good question. Right now, I would say maybe. I would say, it's a hard call because it really will depend on where it's going to. who's going to be involved, whether or not, it's just going to be our students maybe in a museum, let's say, and it's like an isolated thing. It would really depend on the conditions. Right now, we're not planning for field trips, however.
What type of COVID test is needed to return to school after quarantine?
Ms. Ramirez, you could finish your answer first, and then we'll go to the question. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next question is, what type of COVID test is needed to return to school after quarantine? Can it be a rapid test?
That's a good question. You will be informed of the type of test. I don't want to misinform you right now, but you will be informed of the type of test you will need if that event does happen. You will be given specifics about the kind of test you have to get.
The next question is, what is the busing policy for high school?
We're not going to get into busing right now. The busing policy is that all students who live outside the 2-mile range or get bused to school. But I do know that there are some concerns about those who live within that 2-mile mark, but this is not the forum for that. So I can answer the question that far. Thank you.
The next question is around driver's ed. Will you be offering driver's ed this fall, including in-car instruction?
Currently, we have not been able to acquire a company that will offer the same driver's education type package that we have been able to get in the past. We have tried, Mr. Baxter actually has tried many different ones. Mr. Baxter, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I was just going to say that, we've had a program here in the past. Unfortunately, the school we've used in the past closed during the pandemic. And we have reached out to several schools that do a similar type program that is, an in-person lecture, in-vehicle practice. And there are very few that exist. And the ones that we've reached out to have not expressed interest in coming to us. So we'll continue to research it. It's just been frustrating that we haven't been able to secure someone. So right now, as it stands right now, we won't be having driver's ed.
So I have a question here. I don't know if you have the same question, Mr. Baxter, but I think it's an important one. It asks, what happens if one of my child's teachers tests positive for COVID? Who will need to quarantine? So the answer to that question is that we are encouraging and creating classroom setups so that teachers can try to maintain the 6-foot distance from students. They'll be wearing masks, obviously, but the same rules will apply as if a student has been exposed. So if the students come within that 3 to 6 foot range to a teacher, they will be considered exposed. However, if they are unvaccinated, they will be quarantined. And if they are vaccinated, they will not need to be quarantined, but they will need to follow those those even tighter mask rules until they get tested and they test negative for COVID, if that's the case.
There are a couple questions about.
Wait, Ms. Baxter, let Ms. Ramirez answer that
Okay.
question. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Baxter.
There are a couple of questions about performing arts, especially band, in terms of how that's going to look in terms of lessons, classes in the morning, and especially performances, concerts, and the like.
So the concerts and the like are going to be something that we have to, it's going to be kind of a game time decision for an inappropriate metaphor there. But yeah, so it will be something that we address as we get closer, depending on the conditions of the community and the level of positivity rate in the community. However, on a regular day-to-day basis, students will be able to engage in their lessons. They will socially distance during class and during their lessons, but they will be able to participate in their music. They are using some larger spaces during the day to ensure that students are safe and to make sure that that distance is appropriate. Okay, Mr. Baxter.
Somebody would like it to be re-explained, the plan for lunchtime in terms of the QR codes, et cetera. It's just, I think it's because it's something that's different this year. So
Sure.
Somebody would just like a further explanation of that.
Absolutely. It is a little confusing. I think it will be less confusing once students are seated at the table. So basically every table will have a giant orange sign with a QR code on it and a number. And what they do is when they get to lunch, they either, that code goes to a Google form, and students will be able to access that form both on their Chromebooks as well as using their phone. And so they just click on, they just open up that QR code or that Google form. They put in their name, where they're eating, and there's three choices, either outside in the cafeteria or outside of the auditorium area. And they put down the number of the table, and all that does is generate a list for us that we have all together, so that if we do get news that a student was positive 2 days ago, we will just look at that, the results of that form, and look at who else was sitting at that student's table and during their lunch period, and be able to ascertain the students that have been exposed. Thank you.
The next question is, do you know the current rate of COVID infection in Tarrytown? I don't know that I know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know that there are websites that indicate that. I know that what I do know is that the numbers went down in the last few weeks, which is a positive sign. They had spiked a little bit, I think around the 50s or 60 marks, and then they dropped back down, but I don't know the actual percentage rate at this moment. But that is readily available, I'm sure, through the Westchester Department of Health website. Mr. Baxter, any more questions?
There was one question about, we talked about field trips before, but in the past, we've taken trips to Europe every year, with the exception of the last 2 years for obvious reasons. Is there any chance that foreign language trips will happen?
I mean, if I were a betting person, I try not to be, but if I were, I would probably say no, but I can't say that unequivocally that there's no way. I mean, if things improved I think with the Delta variant being as unpredictable as it is, and just the overall conditions of travel being as unpredictable as it is, we could not say, I couldn't say with any kind of confidence that yes, it would happen. I don't want to make a false promise. But we will strive to do what we can to create as many opportunities for students that are feasible and safe for them.
The next question is, are you relying on the honor system with regard to vaccination status, or will students be required to present their vaccination card?
If you are exposed and you are saying that you were vaccinated, I believe the district does require that you show proof of your vaccination to them, like you just would have to send in a picture, let's say, of your vaccination card to indicate that you are vaccinated. And that is not taken care of by the main office. I believe that's taken care of through the nurse's office, to show that. But those details, I'm not 100% sure of the actual process, but you are given that process once you've been communicated, it's been communicated to you that you've been exposed. Okay, Mr. Baxter.
The next question is, are the Regents exams taking place this year?
As far as I know, the answer is yes, but we haven't, it's very difficult to know what the state's going to choose. I think because most school districts around the state are looking to go back full time. It would be likely that they would be presented, but again, the last few years it's been pretty unpredictable, and they've made a pretty late in the year call for Regents exams. But as far as I know now, they are still on.
I know they have been scheduled for this year, so. The next question is, what would prompt the school to pivot to remote?
That's a good question. So I would say the most likely scenario that would cause the district to pivot to remote is either an extreme spike in positive cases in the area, in the region, or in particular in Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown might be one possibility. But the main possibility, or the main reason, I think would be is if suddenly we had a major quarantining of many teachers where we couldn't get substitute teachers in order to supervise students. So when teachers are quarantined, they will be able to teach from home if they are well enough to do so, and there will be a substitute in the building. But in the event that we have, let's say, 12 or 14 teachers who are out due to being testing COVID positive or being exposed, that might not be possible. So those are the scenarios. I don't know that I'm giving you an exhaustive list. Those are the things that come to mind would be possible reasons why we would need to pivot. I think that as a district, our goal is to avoid that at all costs if we can. I just think that everybody would like to stay in school, and to, that's really where learning happens best. But obviously if student health and safety becomes an issue, then we have to pivot. One other possibility too, for a reason to pivot, is if the Department of Health compelled us to do it as well. That would be another reason why that, you know, they could issue an order that requires maybe all schools in the region to close, or just our school, if that's their call.
I do not see any more questions, Ms.
I
Brand.
have a couple here that I just saw. So one was,
Okay.
will a class be held outside when possible? Right now, not that I know of, unless there's something that the class is doing outdoors. For example, a PE class, you know, are often held outside.
And then another one just came in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay. Is the school considering a vaccine mandate for teachers and staff?
As far as I know, I have not heard any news of that. I know that the governor has spoken of that possibility, but the governor speaking of it is not the same as a congressional mandate. And so right now, I haven't heard that, though I will say that our overall, the percentages in our school are better than the local average for vaccination rates. So I'm hoping that isn't, you know, too much of an issue, but we are, I would say, well over 3/4 of our faculty and staff are vaccinated. Somebody asked the question of whether or not there are going to be faculty and staff positioned around students during lunch periods to make sure they fill out the Google form. Yes, and the staff, it's a live form. The live answers come in, and so the faculty and staff will be able to look at whether or not every individual at that table has filled out the form. So a student technically could just sit down and not fill in the form, but they would be reminded by the faculty or staff member if they notice that there was a student's name missing from the table.
And then will juniors and seniors be permitted to leave school grounds for lunch? Perhaps this was asked and I missed it.
Yes, it was answered earlier, and yes, they will be able to. I'm sorry, it was leave for lunch, right? Yes, they will be able to
Yes.
leave for lunch. It's been a long day. I apologize for that. So they will be able to leave campus, but there are some details, and this recording will be posted on the website as well. So if you miss any part of this, you will be able to see the beginning at another time. And I also will post the PowerPoint as well.
I don't see any others on my end.
I have a few here. So it said, are Chromebooks going to be issued on the first day of school? Yes, they will be. And another one, will office hours be held in person? And the answer is yes, they will be. And somebody asked if there are Chromebooks. Kids can either use a school issued Chromebook or bring in their own device. If there are no further questions, I hope we answered everybody's question. If there are no further ones, we want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We appreciate your attentiveness. And please reach out if you have any lingering questions that we didn't get to or that we missed in the chat. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Good night, everyone.